We're starting with our next panel discussion of the day, Stakeholders Panel, the making of global Indian cities, creating city identity. Yes, all of us are talking about smart cities, creating city identities. We saw that once upon a time we had a pink city which looked absolutely beautiful. It's now a mixed version of it all, but truly, let's think about creating a city identity. It can be a spiritual city in terms of when we're talking about giving a new look to Varanasi. Let's see what the panelists have to say about this. May I now request all of you to put your hands together as I welcome on stage our moderator of this session, Ms. Mridhu Bhandari, editor and anchor, Special Projects, ET Now. I'm sure lunch was absolutely wonderful, but none of us are feeling lazy, so let's really put our hands together as I request Mridhu to please join us on stage. We welcome you. I'd also like to invite on stage our panelists, Mr. Manit Rastogi, Managing Partner, Morphogenesis. We welcome you, sir. Let's put our hands together and invite on stage Mr. Ravi Sarangan, Director, Edifice Architects. I'd also like to invite Laurianne Brigdale, General Manager, Design and Development, Green Lamb. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Ajay Madan, Director Sales, South Asia, Zymotel. Thank you so very much, sir, for partnering with us and for joining us in the panel discussion. Let's also welcome on stage Mr. Bharat Yamsanvar, Director, Team One Architects. It'll be absolutely wonderful to see and hear all of you put your hands together. And welcome on stage Mr. Kunal Banerjee, CMO, M3M India. We welcome you, sir. Ms. Namrata Kalsi, Senior Architect, Delhi State Industrialist and Infrastructure Development Corporation. We welcome you, ma'am, once again. Let's also welcome Mr. Ashok Chachar, CMD, Arihan Superstructures. Thank you for joining us, sir. The panel discussion will be for approximately 50 minutes, and we'd like to end with 10 minutes of interactive session. May I request Mridhu to please take it forward?
Take 2 minutes to mic up.
Is it on?
By respecting people and the environment, we show responsibility. We invest in research and development to achieve the best possible quality of life with the greatest energy efficiency. Our expertise in lighting is founded on a blend of knowledge, creativity, and an in-depth understanding of the latest technologies. That expertise is today appreciated by customers across the globe. Thorn is a globally trusted supplier of outdoor and indoor luminaires and integrated controls based on functional design and with flexible modularity. The essence of the Thorn brand is to provide smart solutions and reliable performance. Thorn's mission is to provide products and services that make it easier for customers to specify, install, and maintain good quality, energy-efficient lighting. Thorn stands for reliability, functionality, and technically advanced design within a comprehensive portfolio. Thorn's customer base extends from wholesalers and contractors through to public and private specifiers.
Sure. We're punching here.
Can I request you all to take off the DL tags?
I don't have one. Mike. Please do. I definitely will.
I request you to take off these tags. They might interfere. ये भैया सारे छुपा दो. Thanks.
Thanks.
Put it.
Where is that means can kill you.
Power would
So when are you here till very?
35.
6:30. Right.
So what do I do? पीछे से
Should be able to.
Yeah, are we good to go? So, hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this special stakeholders panel discussion as part of the second Economic Times Architecture and Design Summit. We're really here with one simple thought that, you know, every city has its own identity, has its own character, has its own DNA that's perhaps best expressed by its architecture and the spaces that it consists of. So I'm joined here today by a very eminent panel who's going to be sharing some expert thoughts on really creating global Indian cities and creating city identities. And for the benefit of our television viewers, I'm going to introduce all of them one by one once again to all of you. Starting from my extreme right, Ashok Chajar, CMD Arihant Superstructures, Ravi Sarangan, Director Edifice Architects, Ajay Madan, Director Sales South Asia, Zoomto Bell, Manit Rastogi, Managing Partner Morphogenesis, Lorian Brigdale, GM Design and Development, Greenlim, Asia Pacific, Bharat Yamtanwar, Director Team 1 Architects, Kunal Banerjee, CMO M3M India, and Namrata Kalsi, who's a Senior Architect at Delhi State Industrial and Infrastructure Development Corporation, or DSIIDC as we all know it. So I'm going to start and set the ball rolling by really asking you all one simple question for which I want very brief answers. When you think of a global city in terms of architecture and design, which one would you say is your favorite global city? Can we start with Ashok?
In terms of sectoral development, it would be Jumeirah Lake Towers, that is JLT at Dubai.
Okay. Ravi?
Bombay, London and Paris.
Bombay, London and Paris.
Mumbai would get there. I'm very optimistic. I'm an eternal optimist. I seriously feel that the way they blended history, past and present and future, I think London and Paris have got the right model, where they've maintained tradition and gone global. Of course, trade positioned them at the right place at the right time. I still feel Paris and London. And in India, maybe Mumbai.
All right. Ajay?
I think for me the answer would be a little different. I mean, I always consider India as the country and which was always on the global map. It's only last couple of years, I mean, I think we have only made the situation bad to worse. Otherwise, India was the country to be admired, and India will always remain the country to be admired. So I would like to put India back on the global map and make other countries make parallels to us. So that's my definition of global city.
Manit, what about you?
Terrible question. An absolutely terrible question, with no right answers at all. The point is, how do you view a city? When you say what's the best global city, I mean,
In terms of architecture and design to start with.
but you see, the point is, a city at the end of the day is nothing more than the dross, the leftover of human activity. Okay, humanity goes on living, and what they leave behind is the accumulation which we know as the physical city. And it is virtually impossible to turn around and say that the architecture and design, I mean, you look at Rome, okay, that's one kind of city, and Singapore is another, and at the same time we have Chandigarh, you know, which for architects and architectural students and architectural discourse is probably one of the most important modern cities in the world after Brasilia and Canberra and all of that. So But then you step back into a little bit of history. You've got Shahjahanabad sitting right here. Oh, you are absolutely correct. We've managed to take to the ruins. But the question is, when you say which is the best global city in terms of architecture and design, it is not architecture and design that makes the city. It's the people that make the city. The right to walk, the right for air, the right to live, the right to security, the right to water. These are fundamentals of what make the city. Identity is an emergence of the people of that city. And that's the way I see
if I ask you to pick a favorite, are you going to be able to pick one?
No, I'm not going to pick one for you.
He's still evading that.
All right, so Manit is going to pass up on that question. Lorraine, what about you?
I think that choosing one city is terribly hard. But I've got a fondness for the city that I'm living in currently, which is Singapore. It's an interesting city in that it's changed dramatically over a relatively short period of time to house a large number of people into a small area. So there's a lot of interesting approaches that they've taken in Singapore to people and the way they live in buildings and the way they move about a city, the way they live in a city. And of course, I can't ever talk about wonderful cities without mentioning my beautiful Melbourne.
All right. What about you, Bharat?
I feel the definition of global city, if we see, that some of my friends have said, functionally it should be a sound one. It should be one of the global where we have the integrated approach of old and new. If you see today in today's scenario, what is global is where there is a good working place, where there is a good workforce, where there is a good sanitation availability, and beyond that, the system has been developed in such a way where there is a proper integration of the old and the new one. There are so many examples, but particularly which I have studied for the Shanghai. The old culture is maintained as it is, heritage-wise and otherwise. The new development has been made in such a way that basically it is at the modern living stage over there. The industrial township has been derived or placed or planned or located in such a way that it has a proper cohesion. So the global city, what we say, if you take Europe, it is a totally different where I would like to go and stay. Is that the global? Or the city which has survived after such a long development with the inputs of the modern technology and creation of more jobs and sustainability, that sustainability is the most important thing in today's life. So if you say, I will certainly say it is a challenge which Shanghai has shown. If you compare that aspects with our Indian city and make, which is the global city, Delhi is one of the most important thing with the routines what he has planned. But with the Noida and the another one Gurgaon, two things magnets coming up here, it has totally changed. The old things has no validity. Say Mumbai, Navi Mumbai has been planned with the new Bombay, which earlier was a totally independent satellite township. We can ask the planners what was their vision. But today is a very different thing. Global definition should bring us from the very basic thinking, principles and the future development. Simply the cities which we are experiencing it, if you take even Mumbai with 4FSI, whether it should be there or not, it is immaterial. But how it can be sustainable, how it can be a global? If the market has been increased, that doesn't mean it is a global city.
Right, so we're going to come and touch upon many of those points in the course of the next hour.
I will only value the cities like Shanghai, which will have the global city character in it.
All right. Kunal, what about you?
Well, it's a difficult question in the sense if you dissect it, you say what's a global city? You didn't say what's the most beautiful city. I would agree with you, Lorraine, Melbourne is beautiful. But let's say what we are looking into the future, a global city. From 1979, I'm actually quite old, from 79 I've been watching Singapore grow. So I would tend to agree with some fellow panelists that they have actually evolved into a global city. And they've looked at how people want to live, work, have their recreation time, fresh air, environment, sustainability, transportation, so that you don't get stuck and there's enough places to park and you get taxis on time and things like that. So that constitutes a global city. take it one step further, what is happening in Abu Dhabi today is they are building not only sustainable environmental controlled city, but also high tech in the sense that, as our Minister Venkaiah Naidu ji has said, he wants 100 smart cities. So I think he must have seen Abu Dhabi, because that is really being built into a smart city, where everything is wired, where medical facilities are available online, where banking and finance, education, everything is online. I think that is really, waste disposal is done in such an efficient manner. You just throw your garbage, it gets sucked into the ground, it gets transported by computer straight into incinerator, and it's done, and recyclable energy is produced. Now that's the global city. So I think that's global, but beauty-wise, Madrid, Barcelona, they are beautiful cities, but global city, Abu Dhabi, Singapore. My take.
Okay. Namrata, what's your take?
Actually, down the value chain, I would like to sum up what everybody said, that one cannot say that only one city is the global city. Every city has a different concept. For example, as a seat of power, I would like to say Washington DC is the most powerful city of the world. And with respect to redevelopment, I would like to agree with my fellow panelists, which is the question which is facing India as of now is that how do we raise from the ashes? So that is a city which comes to my mind if we have to raise from the ashes and face the challenge. Of course, Paris and Venice, city of love. England, ex-seat of power. London. So there are so many. But Chicago, yes, I would like to pay homage to it because it is a city which is mecca of modern architecture.
Right, so we have a few favorites here, but I'm going to really start off. We are going to touch upon points on how to create global cities in India. But to start with, I'd like to touch upon the architecture point. So maybe Manit, I'd like to start with you. Do you think architecture and design really need to play a greater role as far as, creating global Indian cities is concerned?
Well, the way things are currently in Indian cities is that architects are marginalized by the way Indian cities have evolved, which is what has changed in the post-independence era. Now, I'll just give a little bit of short history as to why that happened and why our cities have turned this way. I mean, you go back 5,000 years in time from the Indus Valley civilization up till now, we've built some fantastic cities. And these cities have evolved, they've been climate responsive, culture responsive, they've allowed for human capital to be built up from whether they were educational cities or just trade cities. But what went wrong? What went wrong was the fact that post-independence, when we were making our first master plans, there was a big debate as to whether we should be looking at urban design approach or we should be looking at a master planning approach. The key difference between the two is land. In an urban design approach, you take a larger view of the city. You design out or spatially allocate out the buildings. So the vertical plane is sold to individual users, but the horizontal plane of the city is kept completely free and is democratically available for everyone. Now that causes an engagement with the city because suddenly you have public domain. The model that we adopted in all Indian cities rather was the land use model, where you carve out pieces of land and you sell off land to individual owners, government also being an owner, where you boundary wall off the land, and then the architects are contained to working in that parcel of land. So effectively all our cities have become cities of boundary walls. The only democratic space really being the roads that run in between the boundary walls. We put boundary walls around our parks. We put boundary walls around all our public infrastructure. And there is no democratic space of the city left. If that happens and there are no eyes on the public domain, there is a public domain, then how are you going to build engagement of people in a city? Cities are built of memories. When I talk to my grandfather, he tell me, Shahjahanabad, I came here, I was living in Daryaganj, it used to be the farmhouse area of the place. This was I used to walk here, walk there, this is what happened, this is how, But today, we've erased most of the memories. The city has become incapable of generating memories. What are the memories of your children of the city that they're living in? We don't have one. And unless we can begin to reverse that process of land ownership, land cartelization, which is the fundamental problem, I think, of all our cities, they will all look identical, which they are. You go to Jammu, Coimbatore, Srinagar, you go to Siliguri, they all look identical. There is no identity left. And how can you have that unless you're public domain? How can there be a Delhiite or a Bangaloreite unless there is public domain? And that's all that I would like to argue on that. The second part of that game comes to governance. And on governance, we don't follow a mayor model. Yeah. Who is the CEO of our city? Okay, you ask them, Traffic is dealt with separately, land is dealt with separately, water is separate, sewage is separate. They report to separate departments report to separate ministries. And God forsake, you're at Delhi, which is bicameral, some report to the center and some report to the state. It is the craziest web of decision making that by and large no decision can take place. Okay, so unless we resolve both sides of that coin, unless we begin to resolve the fact that there has to be a CEO. Everyone knows in management you can't have multiple leadership. And who do you vote to? So we need the sort of mayor form of governance, which has worked very well for many cities around the world that we all mentioned. And on the other side, we need to change the model of realizing who is the city for. Is it for the people who have land ownership and cars? Or is it for the people who have the ability to engage with the city at a public and democratic level?
And perhaps that also needs to come across when the design of the city is really happening. So, Ravi Sarangan, what's your point of view on that? Do you think our thinking, our vision, when we are planning a city, needs a complete overhaul?
Well, I tend to agree with Manit on almost all what he had said.
Should agree with everything I said.
But I'd just like to add to this that there is a mayoral system in Mumbai, and there is an elected body which governs the municipal corporation, which is wealthier than almost all the other states, some of the states which are existing in this country. But even then, what happens is that where the point of agreement came in is the way we are parcelizing our land and the way we are not thinking holistically. And unfortunately, I'm an eternal optimist, but at this point in time, in our existing city scenario, it's too late to make a change now. So we've always believed in this Indian word called jugaad, and we tend to thrive and come up with some interesting solutions. And in the last 5 years, and that's why I said that Mumbai would probably get the model right, the examples that we all talked about some time back, they don't have to really worry about the population. Here we have population which is kept on increasing, will increase, and at some point in time it's going to burst. But I believe in restricting urbanization, concentrating urbanization rather than spreading it out like the way garden cities of the yesteryears were thought of. So when we are thinking about the urban planning for an existing city with all its inherent problems, we need to think about an inclusive development which traverses across all stratas of society. And that's where the deep thinking has happened in Mumbai, wherein the government recently and much against the wishes of the developers are thinking of having people from all stratas of society coexisting, rather than creating, the earlier thought was to create LIG, MIG, that is low income group, middle income group housing away from the city, and having a concentration of just MIG and HIG.
But as your cities keep expanding, that area is going to come within the city at some point in time, right?
It does, but then there was another event some time back. All our households, we need our home, the maids, your chauffeurs, and we can't live without them. And Mumbai, the way it grew is the way the railway stations emerged. So every single railway station became a kind of a mini township. And you found that people from all strata of societies living in and around there. See, trade determined it. I mean, politically, any global city, the trade or a business community will first enter, and then that's how it spreads. So I see, to answer your question, planners and architects will need to work within the system to make these existing cities go global. And it is not a daunting task. It is a tough task, but you will need to get your mix right in terms of developing each node of the city, which is inclusive, which contains all stratas of society. And it can succeed. It has succeeded in the past, it can still succeed.
Bharat, you've been involved with the planning and design of a couple of cities in India. So how does a city really deal with massive urbanization without sort of losing its identity, or is it bound to keep on changing its identity every few years?
I will like to bring to your kind notice, basically when you are talking about the city and expansion, as our colleagues are saying very nicely, they have put up. Hello? Can you hear now? Okay. See, we have to make up our mind what is new city or what is the development of old city. There are so many aspects in the development of city. Question is, for what purpose the city is, how long it should sustain, whether it has more upgradation possible or not, and who is governing. These are the basic aspects. Let me tell you, all the cities in our nations are the most important thing. That urban culture, what other colleague has said, that you need all hierarchy in the town itself. Now basically I gave you the example like Gandhinagar and the Chandigarh, which were the capital project. It has its own problem which has been created not by the planner, not by the architect, but the governance, which is very important. Similarly, I am telling you about the Mumbai. We have to take, I will take 2 minutes and tell you what is happening in Mumbai. The plans 1970, 1980, 2000, so many plans are coming. What is happening? Revised development plan. What Sarangan has also said is, yes, you can give all thoughts to it, but how long? Why there is an increase in FSI every time? Why there is a cluster development? To whom it is going? National Commission on Urbanization has very rightly brought up 342 towns, how it should be developed. That was the focus. Now if you do not understand the limitations of the town, then these problems are going to increase. As we have Abu Dhabi and other things, since beginning the FSI said the city is planned like that. But if you are planning a city with the 1.3 FSI and 2 FSI, it cannot lead more than 2. So the approach has to be like that. Secondly, once you understand these limitations, the alternative is to go for the second development. What is happening today? These are really a very wrong approach by the present planners, or so to say to the governing people. Delhi with 2 another magnets is again going to get more problems. What was 70 and what is today, you will find it. Mumbai with all those things, again you will find the same problems. So it is a time to rethink at a national level, whether we should have 4, 6, 8, 10 cities all over the country having a proper networking system. So these are the future agglomeration or these are the future cities. In addition to that, let every state may develop, but that development should not be like this as a satellite towns to them. It should be an independent development. There may be industrial town, there may be the port town, there may be educational towns. The character can be rebuilt in that manner. But while doing this, if there is an existing township, it should be coordinated, it should have proper integration that has to be thought. Simply raising, I have made recently a plan, I should not discuss, but Vision 2050 of Mumbai. Total reclamation, total 16 FSI. I was opposing it, but experts from other countries comes and discuss. Am I supposed to do like that? Where is the characters? Then we discuss heritage, this and that. According to me, these cities which are planned from years, 100 years together, had some limitation, let us understand it. Merely by what is spoiling the city is increasing FSI, cluster development and so many things. Integrated plan of national textile was done by me, 27 mills. There were so many inputs given by us. No, only the economic forces plays the role in that. Nobody listens to anybody else.
Namrata, since you're the only sort of government voice that we have around here on this panel, I'm going to ask you to take on that, what Bharat has been saying. So, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to creating?
So when you are planning for this type of towns and other things, what is basically required? I will give a small example of New Bombay. Earlier the CIDCO was an authority for it development control, land, rules, regulations, permission. Corporation has come into existence, there is a conflict. Old buildings which were designed with 0.75 FSI now giving 2 FSI. What will happen? Is it not the right time when we are talking about a national level, what should be the governance and what should be the approach, and for whom the towns are coming and who is ruling it? That's my submission.
So maybe the panel is looking at me for the government approach. So I will give the answer with respect to that. So with respect to government, I would like to state that for city development in our country, we have a very rigid framework of development. For example, if I take Delhi, the framework of development is largely given at a regional level by the NCR Planning Board. Whereafter the sub-regional plans, being it a state subject, is the baby of the state governments, who are then deciding how to, look at land, what are their land policies they are going to have, what is the transport policy, what is their industrial policy, and so on and so forth. But I still feel that in case, the way the population is increasing, that we may have to look at higher FSI, as he said, higher densities we said. That is important because that is the only way we can keep the footprint small and we can have more area for the green. And secondly, it will also bring down the transportation problems, because then you are looking at a very new exciting land use, that is a mixed land use. Like he said some time back, that in India we have that land use policy, this side is housing, this side is industry, and then you connect the both. And people in the city all over the day spend going from one land use to the another. So that way the mixed land use is very nice, because you are living in that area, you are working in that area, and you are playing in that area. And high rise. And another aspect I would like to say is that earlier every city used to have an IPR. Like I just said, that Delhi was a seat of power, Chandigarh was a seat of power, Ludhiana was an industrial town, so and so forth, which is not happening anymore. What's happening that every city is same. Maybe the reason that is...
Why is that not happening? How do we go about...
Yeah, how we go about it, I was giving a thought to it, because that's a challenge in face of the decision makers. That's not happening because every city has to survive. There was a time when we used to have a single department for the whole state. Now we have city departments. Noida has one, Greater Noida has one, Chandigarh, Greater Mohali, so and so forth. Every city has, and they have to survive. Because it is the local economy which is taking a front seat compared to your regional economy. If you are looking at things at regional economy, then seat of power can be subsidized by a seat of education, and so and so forth. So maybe we need to conceptualize the city before we start it. So maybe that will help us build unique cities like we have Oxford, we have Cambridge, which are, lovely cities to live in.
So you're saying that right at the design planning
Absolutely.
vision level we need
Absolutely.
a sort of overhaul.
And secondly, mixed land use is also an instrument by a way of which you can get a skyline, which you will not have if you have residential, you have a height capping, then you have all the buildings same.
Right. So we have spoken a little bit about land use, about parcelization of land. I am going to now touch upon a little bit on the role of interiors and the role of interior design in creating global cities. Ajay, you have been in this field for a while now. How essential is it for interior design to really also match the exterior culture, the exterior identity of a city? And how do we go about doing that in India?
I think first of all, we need to understand and accept the importance of lighting as a core element in our life. I mean, we all know natural light, the sunlight, how important it is not only for an individual being but also for the well-being of an individual. Similarly, natural light, the artificial light also has its own space in our life. Just if I go a step back, I mean, we have been talking of creating global cities. Now, what are the prime elements of creating a global city? We all heard it. Neat city, good infrastructure, safe city, a good health environment, a polluted free city. Now, if these are the prime elements of making a good city, then actually speaking, we are sitting on a huge crisis situation. And why I say crisis situation? Because there are primarily three kinds of crises we are talking about. The climate crisis, energy crisis, and the economic crisis. Now, who's responsible for these crises? We are only responsible. Because the situation that we are living in today is being created by us. Was it existing ever? No. Is it existing today? And if there is a solution, very much. And in more than one ways, all these crises are interlinked with each other. I'll give you an example. Let's say energy crisis. Now, if each one of us become more aware and be responsible of conserving energy, whether through electricity or saving our environment, we are directly saving the climate. So in a way, we directly do the crisis situation of climate. And when we save climate, we are directly conserving the natural resources. That means these natural resources are then made available to the common people, which is more economy friendly, and we are able to create a more economic, progressive environment for the city as well as the country. So we are able to connect all these crises and see that yes, each of these elements are very integral and important for the development. Now from a lighting perspective, if you see, let me share you some hard facts about energy consumptions. Globally, 70% of the energy consumption is being consumed in cities. That means 30% is what is happening either in some rural areas or far areas. Now, out of these 70%, what is getting consumed in the city area, over 50% is consumed from the public, commercials, and the corporates. Now, in that energy consumption, the electricity part is more than 20%. That means when every one of us take a pledge and say that yes, I am going to contribute toward energy saving, towards electricity saving by using more energy friendly products, sources, I think we are in the right direction of creating a global city. Just take a simple example of throwing away an incandescent lamp, bringing in a CFL, getting away from CFL, going into a tube light, energy friendly tube light, or today an LED technology. So if we use different resources and club with smart lighting controls, we can actually save more than 70% of the energy at our house.
Right. So innovation and moving towards new technology is perhaps really at the crux of creating a global city.
Very much.
Lorraine, what would you like to add to that? As far as international trends are concerned in terms of interior design, how are manufacturers sort of aligning their offerings and their innovations with creating global cities?
I think everyone, including manufacturers, understands that a city is, as we all agree, a city is about people. And people are natural beings. And a natural being requires and enjoys a certain amount of their life being spent in a natural environment. So I think that an important part of a global city, and the thing that links the city itself and the environment, the exterior environment of the city, with the interior environment of the city, is that if you have interiors are somewhat dependent on what's happening outside. If the city is a very cramped city and it means that we have very small environments to live in, then the people who are inside those spaces want to move outside more often to get a feeling of space. So if the city is more broadly planned and the spaces that people live in are larger, then they spend more time within their own home and they don't feel the need to venture out and find public space. So that then reflects on manufacturers who are producing products for interiors really have to always keep in mind those two things, because each city in every country is different, and if it's a new city, if it's an old city, and the way it's been developed, the product that works well for a city where everyone is in a very small space and wants to try and find ways to escape, that interior environment is going to be quite different to an interior environment that has plenty of space to relax and live, and that has been historically the way people have lived with the interiors is they've had space to bring their families, to live their lives, and to be inside. So you can't generalise about one thing or another where that's concerned.
I think that is one way to do away with the sameness. See, the material, the concrete, the steel, or maybe plastics in the coming time would determine the high-rise building because we are in the era of high-rise building. So how do we, bring about uniqueness? So maybe at the eye level, that is ground zero, maybe we can have something different. We can have different interiors, we can do different lighting, and there are so many options. So maybe above the eye level, you can have same, but at the ground level same through simple set of guidelines, not bylaws.
So maybe we can get a view from the developer community on this as well. Kunal, how do you offer uniqueness to the Indian consumer, and do you find the Indian consumer, the urban Indian consumer, evolved enough to sort of accept revolutionary change today as far as design and offerings in the residential or the commercial spaces are concerned?
Okay. Well, I don't want to sound controversial or really don't want to harm anyone. I'm not an expert in design and architecture, my fellow panelists here. But one thing I've realized in the last 15, 20 years is that having been involved in some large mini townships, 6,000 acres, 7,000 acre townships in Lucknow as well as in Greater Noida, I've realized that there is an absence of urban planning. And I really don't mean anyone any harm, but we always seem to hire foreign urban planners to come and give the design, and then the local guys take over. Now, I know this is not a sweeping statement, and obviously there are wonderful examples of our own people doing excellently well. And by the way, a lot of these foreign urban planners are Indian origin chaps anyway, so as you will understand, you will realize. So why don't we concentrate on urban planning for the townships, and where you have a 360-degree approach. Now, I was talking to a fellow panelist just before lunch, and I was saying, all of us are working in silos. The interior guy is working on the interiors, and he wants to give the best light, and I'm sure you will do the best sort of laminates and the best everything. The architect is planning a fantastic design, and the landscape guy who is separately, coming from Singapore or Indonesia or wherever you want to hire them from, and he's coming with a resort-like, beautiful garden, and it makes a lovely brochure, and I like it because I can sell it, okay? But end of the day, you have to sell it to people who are looking for a community, almost like a village-like place, where they are going to stay, their children are going to grow, the elderly guys are going to go, grow old there, they're going to walk in the parks, going to mix with neighbors, have a security and a community-like spirit. So the entire thing has to be a 360-degree, design and plan. Whether it's the interior, whether do you have an open kitchen or not. Maybe the Indians don't want an open kitchen because there's too much, fragrance, if I could call it fragrance, coming. Or, maybe you want common areas where people can get together and not go to the club. And then you have an internal common area. So that's an element of design. And I think the expertise is to make an indigenous land which is suitable for the community who is going to buy and stay in that place. So whether you want to call it HIG, MIG, or super luxury, like we in our company build super luxury spaces. So it's a question of what they want and what they're comfortable with. Right. And one can't just work in silos. And something like Malit had said before,
sure,
so all get together,
collaborative
it has to be a collaborative effort. Especially if you're planning a mini township, you're building a big place like, there are places being built in Greater Noida and other places around India, in Bangalore and other cities.
So do you think there's a need for a consortium of sorts when it comes to
it is a must,
projects?
not only in terms of education for some of the young architects and planners over here, to learn from eminent people like you and to plan, test cities, test buildings, to see how people can live and how convenient it is for them, even in terms of environment, energy consumption and things like that. So one can't work as expert silos. My take is that we have to get together in that, and the developer is not, a saint over here. He's also looking to squeeze every, inch in terms of sales. But if the consumer demands and the society demands, and even the government has a will to say that, look, this is how it's going to be, and this is how the future of India is going to look like, and we will all have to comply, whether it's the architect, interior designer, or the developer who has the land.
Right.
As long as
Ashok,
as long as these developments are not just gated developments.
Yeah.
What Manit was mentioning, and I strongly feel that the route that we have adopted across the country is developers obviously want to give you quality, want to give you a quality of life, but unfortunately wherever the private enterprise is involved, they are looking at return on investment, which is fair. Even as an architect, I would be looking at return on investment on my efforts. But then you have to look beyond a gated development. I think it's important.
Which is secure also.
That's where the trick lies in when I mentioned Jugaad, that if I can break these barriers
but you can't really break those barriers without the state sort of supporting it, right?
No, I think it's the trick lies in trying to get you a development. For instance, in Mumbai, more than 80% of the unsold apartments are belonging to the investors. So where is the common man getting his dwelling? Because the prices are high, more than 70%, or maybe my figures may be still on the lower side. So if I could get, Bombay was all about one-bedroom hall kitchen before. Why isn't any developer, and he's going to see quick return on investment? They're not building one-bedroom hall kitchens anymore, or studio apartments anymore. And that's how you're going to get the young guy to book a flat and buy it. So if we can have a mix of smaller, middle, larger and premium apartments all coexisting, then you don't need the barriers.
So right now there are certain areas that are luxury areas.
Let me give you another example. Okay, we thought that what is the way that you can take our existing city. So let's take a city like Delhi, and the beauty of it is that most cities in India, other than Chandigarh, are old, evolved cities. They're not, and they carry with them a lot of history, culture, heritage. But they also carry nalas, okay? And this is the beauty of it. So 6 years back, we did research, thank God, to Google Earth when we could do satellite mapping over our cities, because the government wanted to share data because of security concerns. And we discovered that these nalas that say run in Delhi are about 350 kilometers in length. There are 20,000 of them. They're all interconnected and interconnected to date and all land up at the river. We said about a very simple exercise, because that land, was today carries sewage because of urbanization. What is supposed to carry fresh water now carries sewage. Sewage leads to, public health issues of dengue and this, that, and, smells, whatever. And we came up with a simple solution of how to clean these nalas at source by using organic plantation, reed beds, introducing fish, so you get freshwater canals. That was a simple enough project, and you modulate the embankments. People can walk from Qutub Minar to 30 kilometers away to Shri Ram College of Commerce without crossing a single road. And you could do this all across Delhi. And you can do this pretty much all across any Indian city, because the nalas are the only way to bring fresh water into the city itself. So I said, what a simple and lovely idea. We solve multiple problems, solve Delhi sewage problem, we solve Yamuna's problem, we solve fresh water problem, we solve public health, we get slow-mo transportation, last mile connectivity. And it's wonderful. That's, we got a crack. So we started, then we said, fine, how do we go? Who do we go to? Okay, and that was a good one, because then we started listing out, because these nalas, the embankments belong to the DDA in some part, but because of the sewage flows, that belongs to the Jal board. But when they're going through MCD land, or they go through cantonment land, but then ASI has an influence on this. And by the time we were done, we had 150 agencies that were, now nature doesn't work like that. Okay, when a river flows, it doesn't understand all these boundaries and rules and regulations. So we went to them, each one individually, each department, credit to the Delhi government and various other institutions, each one said, fantastic. Okay, let's do it. I said, yes, but how, who? Okay, we had to, all we needed to do was get 100 people together into one room. which we still not managed to do. We went to press. We've had CNN cover it on World Earth Day as their opening program. We've had people from outside of India say, convert this. The Tughlaqs built it 700 years back. We'll give, Delhi could go up for UNESCO World Heritage status. The Nala network would just go up for it. Yeah. But the point is a simple sweep. It's, we estimated the project cost at 1,000 crores. We've spent 5,000 crores trying to clean the Yamuna. We're spending another 5,000 crores building a complex interceptor canal project, trying to deal with this, trying to deal with the symptom, not the disease. There are simple solutions. We said skip master plans. Let's go in and do strategic intervention and demonstrate success at a grassroots level. Nothing succeeds better than success. If you can break down these boundaries, and all our cities have that possibility.
In fact, the guy in Bombay.
Anytime something is to be done, the day when it is designed, it is never, none of the problems are known. So when after an era, there is going to be problems, so you need to find out a sustainable solution to it.
But so you have easy ones.
Like you won't have any problem which you would have designed up today for a futuristic city, which you may like to have it for the next 50 years, and you won't have a problem at the next 50th year. What the viewers would like to also know about, like how again touching base back to the global cities, or
so and also Ashok, I have a question for you. You build structures, you've sort of transformed the skyline at Navi Mumbai. How do you sort of maintain a balance between the old and the new? We are looking at a future, we are looking at global cities, we are looking at smart cities, and yet there is an old world charm, there is a history that we don't want to leave behind in the process. That's something we want to carry forward as well. So as a developer, as a planner, how do you really get around that?
See, it's very oldly told about, right from the ages of Mahabharata, that is, Krishna Bhagwan ne kaha tha ki parivartan hi sansar ka niyam hai. So anything which is old, it is not like you have to continue it across. It's in fashion changes, new likes come, so there would be new texture to the city. Never was 3 decades ago, glazing would have been very much known or appreciated when people traveled across, wherever, right, starting from California to Canada, everywhere. This is how new things will come across. It is not about maintaining the old or repeating it out the same.
But the flavor has to be carried forward, right? The
not
history or the
art, every form of art is an art in itself. So new art is also having the same weightage. If you talk about even between generations, there is liking for a separate type of art. So in the new ages, there would be a different liking that has to be adopted, and it would be adopted. Coming to what would an individual like to have in the global cities as an citizen over it, that is where the master planning also come across. The word master planning sounds very small, but we can achieve the success of a correct design which would be liked across only when few measures should be taken. Like government technocrats are not very much exposed to the designs and to the world around. So they should not become the doer. They should rather than become they should have the willingness to do it up, and they should leave the doer part to the consultants, not only restricted to the design aspect, but seeing to that you implement it also. The day it is done, you will have a good city, good design. Touching base to the local issues as on today, whatever we have, which needs to be incorporated in the new designs. The architects and the planners are more better off than me. I make money by constructing. But I have seen all the cities. I have seen some of the major cities. Maybe the modern one, like Shanghai, Dubai, or everywhere. Car parking again becomes a major issue. Whenever master planning is done, over a trench of 500 meters, there should be a car parking slot building. Car parking building slot should be there. Because however good master planning you do, you put up 10%, 50%, 15% visitor car parking in the project designed by the customer, by the developer. The watchman, the security does not allow your car to move in, saying that no, the security reasons.
I can see the architects getting restless and wanting to comment on that.
It's very much necessary to have car parking buildings as an amenity, which is equivalently necessary as green spaces, gardens, etc.
Okay. So, Manit, I can see you're feeling a little restless and you're wanting to
I'm actually running out of time. But no, my only comment on that was that, we talk about, smart cities, global cities. The opposite of smart cities is dull, stupid, unintelligent. That's the sort of definition of the opposite of smart cities. So when we say we're going to build smart cities, it means that to date we've been building dull, unintelligent.
But how would it be done?
Call it
Okay.
smart.
How would it be done?
No, I don't want to come to that part. And
Unless it is privatized, I don't think it would be done.
Huh?
The government won't be able to
No, I
do a
disagree.
smart
I
city.
think there are very bright people in the government. I've had some fantastic interactions.
They can defend
But
our policy.
there are also limitations to their own systems, which restricts their performance.
So maybe it's time to revamp that
It's
system.
time to revamp that system. I don't think it's a function of the people. I think it's a function of the system that needs that. But let me just to conclude. Okay, we speak London, Shanghai, etc., whatever. The big thrust in our cities today is TOD, transit-oriented development.
Correct.
Okay, now let us see how this works. Okay, you're talking about car parks, etc., and I'm saying that if you look at London, we were consulting on a project there in central London, an office tower that we were consulting on. They said the local council told us that you will get 10 car parks. Okay, there are 500 people in the building that we were designing for 10 car parks. It's the reverse. You force people to use public transport.
But then you have to have an evolved public transport.
That you have to have an evolved public transport system. Okay. Here we do TOD. Our FARs have been shooting up from 1.25 to 1.75 to 3. But the number of car parks that we are supposed to give are going up exactly in the same amount, which is ridiculous. Okay, because then you're going to end up with 5 or 6 basements, or say we're going to end up with a city of car parks. We're turning a city into car parks. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Okay, fair point.
Everybody will desire to have a car park. Nowadays, it won't be even one car park per house. I think, so with my house, with your house, you used to be having multiple car parks.
No, that's
so we have to find out a solution
that's
to
the
it.
disease, sir.
It's not a disease. This is a requirement. It has to be addressed. like car parks. Similarly, even we have to educate when it comes to Indian economies or Indian cities. We do not have an education.
So one view is really to reduce the use of the cars and, instead of
restricted.
every individual shift to carpools, shift to
cycling, that's what our global cities are doing, that we keep talking about, saying whether it's Shanghai or London.
In the ownership of the car.
Right.
You have to give servicing
to bring the car in. You have
into
to
the
go
city.
with the mass transit.
While we keep building our cities
But
for
that
cars.
is a part of the planning, which we would like to say, yes, it is a part of the planning.
Things are going to happen. You say that there will be 10 car parks, but people who desire to have more than one, as and when the West it has to be there. We have to provide a solution to each and every requirement of a citizen. And it is a requirement, maybe from garbage disposable as well as segregation, etc., etc. That is where the cities would go across in the coming days.
All right, so we have a good set of contrarian views out here. But just to conclude, I'm going to be really strict. I'm going to time you. I'm going to give you 10 to 15 seconds each. What is that one low-hanging fruit, the next step that India can really take as an immediate step in order to get moving in the direction of global cities? So I'm going to start with Namrata this time. One low-hanging fruit, the immediate step that you think the country can very easily take.
Okay, what I would like to say, it's a sum up of the discussions taking place by the panel, that when we are moving toward the smart city, what I feel everybody would like to have a city which does not have a barrier. So smart city means which does not have a barrier. It doesn't have a barrier of departments. It doesn't have a barrier of transport. It doesn't have barrier of racial discrimination or anything like that. So this is what we are feeling, that we are moving toward a platform, single platform on which the city works.
How do we do that? What is the one step that we can take as a country, as a nation, to really get moving in that direction?
I think I can see a scene from a sci-fi movie, that there's a room in which, every department is sitting together. There are screens. There are screens on every side. Here is the water pipeline, and you can see actually the water moving down, and you can see a very qualified, techno-savvy person managing that. Next is the person who's managing disaster management. Third will be using, looking at land use, and so on and so forth. So we have a single platform where the entire city is working. This is what I feel.
That's a banyan tree.
That's a banyan tree.
That's what we hope for. Yeah.
No, it's not easy.
It's not easy.
The smart city is not easy. So I just disclosed, that in Punjab there was a thing called the Suvidha Center, in which they were trying to bring the citizen services under one umbrella. So, and just mind you, it was not an easy task. It was not an easy task. So the current Prime Minister has set forth an agenda for the architects and the planners, which is not easy to achieve. This is what I feel.
Okay. Kunal, what is the one low-hanging fruit that India can very easily start working on in order to move to become a global, to create global cities?
Well, in a nutshell, stipulation for a digital way of planning with
Absolutely.
green technology being a stipulation by the government, and this is the way ahead, and these are the norms which are fixed and agreed by a corpus of knowledge and partners within the industry, and move ahead only on those lines, and we can't go wrong, and that's the lowest hanging fruit I could grab for.
And taking a collaborative approach.
Absolutely.
To that. Right. Bharat, what about you?
What Kunal has said further to that digitalization, prioritization of new towns, upgradation of new towns, or upgradation of existing towns in the most integrated manner, that is what I can say.
Lorraine?
I don't think there's any such thing as low-hanging fruit. But I do think that green building is absolutely paramount, and it's important to humans and for even our existence, not just for a city, one city. It's actually important for our entire existence. So for me, that's the most bottom line.
So make it mandatory to have green construction in every global city that we plan. Yeah. Manit?
Well, it is mandatory for all government projects in India to be green rated, but be that as it may. I think the low-hanging fruit, given the fact that we, after a very long time, have a party in parliament which has power, is to make right to air a constitutional right. Amend the constitution and say right to air. I think a lot will help break down.
Sorry, right to air.
Clean air.
Okay.
The right to breathe.
Right, so the right to life would sort of cover that.
Right to life is impossible. That's not one you can cover by constitutional amendment. But you can cover, right to water, right to air.
Okay, that's an interesting thought. Ajay?
Yeah, I mean, this will always remain a low-hanging fruit, and it's within our reach. I mean, I as an individual, you as an individual, can definitely pledge today to say, let's say, I take a pledge to save 30% of the energy at my house and at my workspace, which will directly links to the society and to your country. And it has a direct implication to the economy and to the climate. So that's my pledge. Maybe yours can be different.
Okay.
For me, I still firmly believe in not building newer cities because it is going to, it's ultimately the people who are going to come to a place where they need to live. So low-hanging fruit for me and related to Mumbai is exploiting the railway land to its maximum potential. They're the largest owners of land within, and it connects people across stratas of society. So a friend of ours, Alan Abraham, architect, did something which is similar to Manit. He created a cycling green connecting all the railway stations in Mumbai. Fantastic idea. It's a simple idea, common sense, low-hanging fruit, can be achieved, very easily achieved, because the owner of that property above the railway line is single, which is the Indian Railways.
Okay, fabulous. Ashok?
And the density of the population in each and every area should be very well defined so that there is no congestion for the second or third generation around. So it could be sustainable for 50 years plus.
So have an inclusive growth plan, really.
So in addition to the railway land, why it is important is because you do away with cars altogether. I'm sorry about this, but
you won't be able to live with it. I think none of you will be able to live with it. See, that was a solution. Right. That was a solution saying that there was a problem.
We'll have to take this discussion offline now because we've completely run out of time. But it's been a pleasure talking to you all. Thank you very much for joining us here today. And in the end, I guess architecture or the design of a city, the identity of a city should truly inspire, should truly engage the citizens, make them exhilarate in awe. And hopefully with a panel like this, if we could just emulate this at a larger level and have diverse opinions and sort of arrive at a middle path, then we could possibly retain some of the old world charm and move forward to global cities. Thank you all very much, and panelists are here We can take possibly 2 questions for lack of time. So if there's anyone.
And a small round of applause.
Yes, a big round of applause, please. Okay. Can you give us 5 more minutes? Okay, Manit has to leave, so I'm going to quickly ask if there's anyone who wants to ask him a question first. General question. Okay, let's go with that.
Old means you are putting that city on a ventilator. That is one thing which I always hate. It should be a city center, nowhere in the world. It's a London center, it's a downtown, but in India, it's a New Delhi. Secondly, about saving energy, 30% of the rural electricity consumption, rural just gets 30%. One thing.
Okay, sure, please. Thank you so much.
If I tell my client for energy saving to make a smaller room which has 12 by 14 or 11 by 12, my clients are going to throw me out. They want 40 by 30. Last time everything is put aside. So that, how we can create a global business, we need to educate. What is important?
Very much. Definitely.
Sure.
So it is not a question.
Gentleman there.
I'm not having a question.
Please welcome.
In agreement.
My name is Arun Virmani. I'm an architect. Frankly, it's not easy to ask a question, so I'm not going to pretend there's a question. Manit has gone already. Incidentally, I was in Lucknow. I'm a Delhiite for the last summit there. So some idea generated there, which I'm going to carry on now. But there was a question, partly. We have a lot of good architects in the country. Can you say one good town planner in the country? That is what the problem has been. The good town planner, personally I don't think there has been a good town planner. Maybe Le Corbusier was one with a strong personality, and then it led to good Chandigarh, and the Chandigarh influence has also traveled to Delhi and elsewhere. The thing which I want to say is, taking an example of Delhi, like there are so many monuments, and around the monument there are very strict laws. You cannot build something. So Qutub Minar is one. Go to Mehrauli, maybe you have a population of 50,000. Buses go, people go, and there is a lot of traffic jam. So why not amend the law, particularly in terms of the situation? Take another, on the other side of the road, one side is the monument. If people have not gone to Qutub Minar and Mehrauli, you can always go again. On the other side are some private buildings. There are always laws, there are setbacks, there are other things. The civil laws, particularly when it comes to the good of the public, then the laws should be that no matter what happens, this matter shall be entertained easily, quickly, and so take that land into the setback, create that wider road and solve the problem. We are wasting so much of energy, etc., etc. Last point, you have talked about things. We in India have lots of things, but we do not know how to promote them, we do not know how to sell them. I keep going to New York now, the last 14, 15 years. I know, they know how to, in New York, take you around this thing. We have much better things in India. We do not know how to promote them. Thank you very much for listening. The last bit, we have laws, but we do not implement them, etc., etc. That everybody knows, but the time has come to do that. And think about the present government, it can do it if it wants to. Thank you.
Right. Anyone else? Sure.
I am Ananya, I am an architect, and actually according to me this is not the problem of urban design only, it's the problem of overpopulation. Because looking India as a whole at a macro level, I mean only like Mumbai, Delhi or NCR, this is getting overpopulated and people are coming from all over the other states. So the solution lies in creating jobs in other states also, developing the infrastructure at other places also and other states. So that, because I mean Delhi has a very good design, it's a city, and but if you keep on overpopulating it, so how much can it take? So it's not a problem of urban design, but I mean new cities have to be created elsewhere in every state. So there has to be a proper distribution of population. So it's a problem of governance at the top level. So I mean we have to see that for every state jobs have to be created, offices have to be created there, then the residential people will come there, residential towns will come there only. So then like why Chandigarh, I mean because it's not populated, so, and in comparison to Delhi and NCR, So that is why, I mean, it is more based.
Fair enough. That's a challenge that we are going to have to grapple with.
Just to answer, if you manage to distribute population across our country,
Yeah.
you need to be God.
Yeah.
No, I mean the solution
that is what the new growth center, that is what the new growth centers have been created by the organization. Your true new growth centers needs to be created, which the government is also doing.
Bharat has a point to make.
I will just try to address your question in a little different way. Hello. See, that you are saying that the dispersal of job or creating the jobs, it is created. Question is, in today's scenario, suppose you take an example of Mumbai specifically.
Yeah.
All hutman dwellers have been blessed. They are again blessed. They are continued to be blessed. What for? On whose land? Is there any restrictions on that? I raised the point that a person who is coming, say up to 2,000, all the hutmen have been authorized. Those persons have a authority up to 2,000, they should be given voting powers in Mumbai in that ward. Anything beyond that, as his birthright, he can go to his village from where he has come and give the voting there. If something of this type comes in Mumbai, naturally there is a restriction. That is one aspect. You, as Saranga said, job creation is altogether a different thing, different type. You are creating towns and other things, the jobs will be there. But even in a place like Mumbai or Delhi, if that land is not owned by him, he has no right to encroach on that and make a part of it. So this is a very particular thing. So ultimately what it comes, growth of population doesn't say, they are not being invited. There is a job, but there is a system which has accommodating them. If the accommodation stops, if not, then there will be ways and means by the government and other things for creating the housing. MADA is there, or housing boards are there. It will be certainly done. So unless these restrictions come, no town in India will have a good days. It will be again same low level, below poverty level, or not a human level of nature of living in that city. So it is chicken and egg. Unless you stop, it is a time when we have to stop it totally. Then and then the planning, funding, realization, expert opinion will serve, otherwise not.
Let's have a huge round of applause for our panelists here today. Thank you all very much. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so very much, Mridhu, for moderating the session. I'd like to request the panelists to stay on for a couple of more minutes while I thank Mridhu and invite her to be a part of the audience once again. Thank you, Mr. Lal, for your questions, and for all the audience members, our panelists will continue to stay on, so maybe we can take another round of questions during tea and coffee. May I take this opportunity to invite on stage our very own Rishi Kapoor from our team, that is. Let's put our hands together and invite him while he joins us on stage to thank each one of our panelists. Thank you for making it such an engaging panel discussion. Let's put our hands together once again for our panelists. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your presence. I'm sure all of us learned a lot more than just these many applauses. I'm sure we can really put our hands together for them. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Brigdale. Thank you, sir. Ms. Kalsi, appreciate your presence. And may I request all of you to please join us for a group picture. May I request the panelists to please join us for a group picture. Thank you, Rishi.